Hello and welcome to Cujo Sound, and this is Game Audio Talk, where we talk about a specific video game and its audio features. It's not a review of the game as a game, it's a discussion about how the sounds are made, how they are implemented, and how various solutions can solve the same issue at hand. Here we will talk about We Happy Few, and this is the second video I made about this game. And if you haven't watched the first one, you don't have to do it now, you can also do it afterwards. So let's get to it.
Bridge. I've got to get to the bridge. In the parade district, which I just got chased out of. Brilliant.
We Happy Few offers a procedurally generated world when being outside. Of course, certain elements are in certain places, but the actual open space with buildings and so on is procedurally generated, which is also very nice and also gives you a slightly different experience if you're playing the game more than once. Besides from that, the game has some really nice soundscapes when you're just walking around, and it's a very smooth experience as the footsteps are very well produced. The same goes for the weather effects and other things, as they are all clearly mixed to fully work around you in surround. Walking, jumping, falling, landing, all have very smooth sounds.
Except for the night. We would never know the stars.
And from what I gather, these sounds in particular has been created by someone with great recording expertise and experience in mixing and recording Foley. When exploring a procedurally generated world, and when developing one, you might bump into a bunch of issues. But here is a great example of a sound weenie, which catches the player's attention and drags you towards this house here. For this to work, the sound must be attached to a blueprint of the house, as it's called in Unreal. And the procedural algorithm is now free to spawn this house anywhere it wants, and the sound will still play. A sound weenie is also what we could call an audio location informant. But what is particularly curious about this little lullaby-style music that is being played right now is that it seemingly has no source, making it a weird mix of diegetic and non-diegetic, and depending on how it's revealed, that would be known as acousmatic. But there's also another term for it, and that is hyperlocalization. A term greatly explained in the book called Sonic Experience by Jean-François Arcoyard and Henry Torg. Also, for more specifically video-gamed explanations about this, in my own, hopefully soon published book and articles called The Tuning of the Game. Hyperlocalization is when a sound binds your attention to a point of emission, and your attention follows that source regardless of its visibility. This sound source is either non-existing, making it non-diegetic, or simply hidden, but regardless of its physical location, we perceive it as a localized sound. Hyperlocalization can also be used to describe a sound which is very unique to a specific object, yet the sound continues to exist even after the object does not any longer or the object stops moving. We still perceive it as it's moving because the sound makes us feel that way, or it leaves an empty space where there should be a sound. And this is very much the case here because the music we hear is quite loud and audible far away, thus creating an informant and an audio weenie dragging us to the house. The sound here, on the other hand, is actually emitted from this record player and stops as we interact with the object. This actually removes the label of it being a hyperlocalized sound, and the sound now becomes a so-called delocalized or ubiquitous sound. This is when we are fully aware of a sound's origin, as we just became. And because it stops playing as we interact with the record player, we are now completely aware of the sound and its nature. Though the sound was quite unnaturally loud and spreading out, causing a bit of mismatch here, the sound is now delocalized. A ubiquitous sound is when a sound is not rooted to an object or seemingly coming from nowhere, as it was before we entered the house. But because the sound was at first such, but because it was later revealed to us as coming from the record player, the sound shifts between all three terms. As the sound is ubiquitous when its source is not revealed, hyperlocalize as the sound is quite clearly playing, and once it stops, it leaves an emptiness of this area, and if you think about it, you can sort of still hear it in your head. And the sound is delocalized because we were made aware of its origin, and our focus shifts once we start to do that, and it's no longer a weenie and a guidance of sound as it was before. And now it's actually a gameplay sound coming from the record player. Okay, enough with the theory here. We Happy Few has some really nice sneaking mechanics, especially because you cannot always see the NPC you're facing and need to avoid. There is a nice visual system to guide you, but you can actually listen closely to their footsteps, and this will tell you which type of enemy you're facing, which is a great help when you're trying to figure out more than just their movement pattern. In this case, it's just a normal soldier that doesn't have that much of a sound to his footsteps, but there are other characters which has very unique footsteps patterns, and it becomes very clear to you how to approach them without being able to see them. We Happy Few also has what many other games also have, the ability to hide in certain types of tall grass. But just as explained in my video about Horizon Zero Dawn, notice how the sounds here of the grass you're hiding in are actually much louder than the grass that you cannot hide in. So hiding in grass is perceived as hiding because of the sound being played, rather than actually making you more noisy in the natural world.
I think I'm actually sick.
And this is a great example of how some sounds, regardless of their volume, can be perceived as silent or making you more silent and support the narrative of your character being more silent when moving. But let's enjoy some of the great soundscape here for a moment, just moving about and picking some fruits and flowers. The sounds of movement works really well here, and it's really well mixed, as I've said before.
I think this might be the one Sally and me tried to blow up. I always wondered what happened to the letters. There was an awful lot of smoke.
Another interesting thing here in the game is the use of drugs. If you watch the first video about the game, you will notice how the world is perceived differently when you are off the drugs than what the other characters in the game seem to perceive. Also, in this part of the game, the music is slow and out of tune, but when you are on drugs here, the music will be sounding correctly, or at least sped up. The same goes for this piano here. Playing it makes it sound disgustingly out of tune and dissonant, whereas if you did this on drugs on other pianos, the chords would sound perfect.
When life for noise, pop a joy.
You can also do mushrooms and everything becomes much lighter around you, and some Indian-inspired music is played in the background. The voices of your enemies are also changed and have added effects depending on which drug you're on. But more importantly, what they say is also different depending on what drug you're on.
Who's on guard, you? Go back to Germany, you swine!
When on Joy, all gore-related graphics are also changed into butterflies. Also, the entire game world is changed into a more colorful graphic and sound aesthetic, which becomes very clear once you go out of the drug state at some point.
Snug as a bug on a drug. There you are.
I'm so looking forward to the Battle of Flowers, aren't you?
These kinds of sound changes can be made in many different ways, but because it is such a global thing in this game, the easiest way to do it would be to set a state in Wise, which is global. On drugs, not on drugs, overdosing, on mushrooms, crashing, or combinations, and so on. then every time a sound will play, you will only need to have one trigger, and Wise can check for the current state and then play the correct sound. Using a switch would be ineffective in this case, as it would have to be set on all game objects, whereas a state is global and affects all sounds, if that's what you want. You can even do too much of the drugs, but it will still speed up the music and the sounds around you, but your vomit is still butterflies. The music also pitches and sounds change as you go in and out of these states. You can also mix the drugs and be in several states at one time, crash from one drug while being high on the other, or being high on two at the same time. The switching hierarchy in their Wise project must be rather insane to do this.
You don't look as happy as can be.
Bloody hell. I can't keep taking joy like this.
I hope you enjoyed this little video about We Happy Few, and is ready for more videos to come about the music and other sounds in this game, as well as in other games. Thank you very much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and if you want to know more. Or if you want to support this channel, head over to patreon.com/Cujo Sound, where you for as little as $1 a month can help me afford taking the time off to create all this material. I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching again, and I'll see you next time.
Every day for it.
Cujo Sound, signing out.
I don't want to forget. Not again.